Well, welcome to Airmanship 2.0, case study number 2, More Money Than Sense. I'm Dave Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Airmanship Excellence, and I'm going to be working with you this evening on this case study. Thanks for joining us. Quick checkout on the panel here if you haven't attended one of these webinars before. Pretty straightforward. If you want to collapse your window, your control panel, which should be showing on the right-hand side of your screen right now, you can just click on this white arrow and the orange triangle, and that will collapse, and if you click on it again, it will expand your control panel. If you want to send a text message while we're going through the webinar, you can do so by typing text into this box right here and pressing send. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, you can click on the raise your hand icon, and I'll see the icon here on my control panel, and I can open up your mic. Otherwise, I keep all the mics muted because there is a tendency to have a feedback problem if we leave all the mics open. Now, as I'm sure you've already noticed, this is a PowerPoint presentation. However, no sleeping is allowed while you're attending this webinar, because you do get a Wings Program credit. You get 1 knowledge credit for attending this evening. The seminar sponsors are the FAA Safety Team and the Center for Airmanship Excellence. What I'd like to do before we roll into the webinar itself is just get a feel for who else is here on the webinar with us this evening. So I'm going to ask a couple of you guys to please share the answers to these questions, and I'm going to open up or ask Ken Steck. Ken, I have your mic open. Would you give us a little bit of information about who you are and what kind of flying you do? Ken, are you there? Okay, not getting anything from Ken. He must have gone to sleep already. How about Dan Kafka? Dan, are you there? Okay, I'm going to try one more. Paul? Are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, would you share the answers to a couple of these questions with us, please?
What kind of flying do I do? I've been flying Cessna 152s and 172s since about 2008. I have a little over 200 total hours in the 172. Last Sunday, I just finally passed my check ride in the R22. I have coming up on 100 hours in the R22. I probably fly at least, several times a month. I try and alternate between the two. If I go on longer trips, something more than an hour and a half, 2 hours, I'll take the 172. If I want to do something just for fun, maybe my wife and I or my daughter and I will just take the helicopter up and, maybe go for a 25 or 50 mile flight. So we have fun with that. I fly out of Rockford, Illinois and Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I've been to several of these webinars, before, and find them very interesting and informative.
Great, thanks, Paul. And being an old rotorhead myself, I know you're probably having just one heck of a lot of fun with that R22. So great. I'm going to open up Rick Ketley's mic. Rick, what brought you to the seminar? What kind of flying are you doing?
Well, good evening. This is kind of interesting. This is my first webinar, and interested in learning all I can. I'm a commercial pilot in Northern Illinois. I do some aerial applications along with with my farming. So, flown, I don't know, different airplanes, but the R22 is something I've always wanted to explore. So, I'm excited about this. Ready to go.
Great, thank you, Rick. And I'm going to ask Bill Brand. Bill Brand is another Center for Airmanship Excellence volunteer. And Bill, I'm going to open up your mic. Would you share some of these things with the guys?
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm a part of the Center for Airmanship Excellence and head of their training committee at the moment. And right now I'm just maintaining my currency at Blue Skies Airport in Lake Indian Hills, flying the Archer 3 and their simulator. What brought me to this webinar is I'm very concerned about the accident rate that we have encountered in general aviation, and I'd like to see just how this airmanship excellence can increase our awareness of things we can do individually to lower the accident rates.
Thank you, Bill. And I'll share a couple other things about Bill with the rest of you. That Bill, like me, is a former United Airlines captain, retired from United a few years ago, and has flown for many airlines, worked in many airlines training departments. So Center for Airmanship Excellence is really lucky to have Bill working with us on the training programs that we're developing for the Airmanship Development Support Organization demonstrator that some of you I know have heard about on other webinars. I'm going to ask one more here. We got a bunch of folks on here this evening, so we won't take all of our time doing this, but I want all of us to kind of get to know each other a little bit so we know what kind of flyers are on here. Don Reeser, I've opened up your mic. Would you share the answers to a couple of these questions with us, please? Okay, Don isn't responding, so let's go ahead and move on then. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to do in this webinar. It will examine an airmanship-related accident that could have been prevented if the pilot had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, and we'll get to that in just a second. And this case study involves a fatal crash. Now, first of all, I'm going to define Airmanship 2.0 for those of you who have not attended any of these webinars before or been to any of our seminars or have not visited our website, because this is our definition, the Center for Airmanship Excellence definition of Airmanship 2.0. And the context within which we've postulated this definition is personal flying. So we're not talking about flying for the airlines or the military or corporations here this evening. We're talking about the kind of flying that most of us are doing right now, flying for our own personal pleasure or personal transportation. Airmanship 2.0 really asks the questions, if I don't fly right, should I fly at all? And Airmanship 2.0 answers that question. If you're going to fly, do it right. Now, this is a quote lifted from a book written by Tony Kern called Redefining Airmanship, and he quotes General Chuck Yeager as saying, if you're going to fly, do it right. And the more that we looked at that, thought about it, we thought this is really Airmanship 2.0 in a nutshell. Because Airmanship 2.0 to us means doing it right. Now, of course, we have to define what doing it right is. And again, this is our definition. Airmanship 2.0 is a new paradigm in personal flying. It's based on tried and true airmanship principles that have proven to be effective with the airlines and the military. But those practices and principles have been modified for use by us personal flyers, for use in today's flight environment at a reasonable cost. Airmanship 2.0 is a new way for you to enjoy flying. It's a new approach to maximizing the personal rewards you get from flying. Airmanship 2.0 increases the value you get for your flying dollar, and we all are looking to do that, I believe. Airmanship 2.0 continuously enhances your airmanship skills, knowledge, and capabilities. In other words, Airmanship 2.0 is a surefire way for you to become a safer, more proficient aviator. Airmanship 2.0 includes flying in what we call an Airmanship Development Support Organization. That's a generic term to the type of flight organization that would support your airmanship development. And again, this is kind of a lot of information behind what this ADSO is, and I'll show you where you can get more information on that in just a minute. But in our view of Airmanship 2.0, you fly within a formal organization. That formal organization has a high-performing safety culture that has all of these elements in it. And also you use, if you're practicing Airmanship 2.0, a safety management system. Airmanship 2.0 provides you with structured airmanship challenges that are fun, offer recognition and rewards, are bite-sized. In other words, they provide continuous improvement. Airmanship 2.0, here's a quick formula, a quick way to remember it. It's airmanship challenges plus flying fun plus recognition, and that equals continuous airmanship improvement. Airmanship 2.0 includes your formal airmanship training plus your informal airmanship training, and that equals your personal airmanship development plan, which is a formal plan that you lay out for, we recommend, a year at a time, that continuously improves your airmanship. Airmanship 2.0 includes a personal training team made up of training management, mentor pilots, senior instructors, and associate instructors. Airmanship 2.0 includes airmanship development tools like flight data recorders and cockpit video recorders that you can use as a debriefing tool for self-assessment or along with a mentor pilot or an instructor to help you improve your airmanship. Those parameters can be recorded on that flight data recorder and then accessed after it's uploaded to a server to accessed by any PC on the internet, and you can look at your flight from many different points of view. Here you can see this particular display is a graphic showing aircraft attitude and also is geo-referenced, and here you see a representation of the instruments. Here you can see some traces on charts like altitude hold and that sort of thing. So, and you can also, again, look at the video, listen to the audio, look at the video of the view out the windscreen. So that with tools like this, you can use them to assess your current level of airmanship and your improvement, your airmanship improvement. Very important to have tools like this. Airmanship 2.0 includes the aircraft you fly. So an Airmanship 2.0 airman might be flying old airplanes, but only for the fun of flying an old airplane, not for personal transportation. Personal transportation, you use the aircraft with all the latest safety devices, all the latest technology. Airmanship 2.0 also includes fun airplanes like light sport aircraft, but again, all the latest safety devices, all the latest technology. Now there's one exception here that we advocate that if you're practicing Airmanship 2.0, you get a tail dragger qualification course, and then you maintain proficiency in a tail dragger periodically throughout the year, so that your takeoff and landing stick and rudder skills are up to par all the time. So it's new airplanes with the glass, but learning and flying and staying proficient in the good old basic stick and rudder stuff also. Airmanship 2.0 includes the way that you fly these aircraft. Personal transportation for the challenge and for the fun. Airmanship 2.0 includes a flight operations support team that helps you with trip planning, flight dispatch, so there's shared decision making. You're not making the go, no-go decision all by yourself. Flight tracking, so that you're not out there by yourself. In-flight support through various leading-edge communications channels, satellite phones, text messaging, that sort of thing, so that you can get your ground support team to help you in flight. Trip management, usually things change, and when things change, a lot of things have to be rearranged. So the flight operations support teams help you with that. All of these things are designed to share the decisions with you because that's much safer, much more efficient. It makes the experience much more enjoyable for you. You're never out there alone. You're not in those tight situations all by yourself. Hopefully you never get in the tight situations with the flight planning support and so forth that the flight operations support team provides. I believe personally that just that dispatch function itself would probably reduce the personal flying accident rate by 80 to 90% if everybody adhered to a policy, an Airmanship 2.0 policy of always agreeing with a FAA licensed dispatcher that the flight is a go. If one of the two, if you or the dispatcher don't agree that the flight is safe to operate, then the flight doesn't go. Also, this flight ops support team can run with you, help you work through a flight risk assessment tool before every flight. So there's a lot of things this flight ops support team can do for you. And again, this is the type of thing that's already being used in the airlines and military. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg on Airmanship 2.0. Can't go through all the details here because we're here for another purpose tonight, but I believe you needed to know a little bit about Airmanship 2.0 when we start talking about this particular case and how Airmanship 2.0 would have prevented this particular accident. If you want to find out more about Airmanship 2.0, go to the Center for Airmanship Excellence website, which is airmanshipexcellence.org. And here you see there's a menu button that'll take you into the section devoted to Airmanship 2.0. Find out everything you want to know about it. All right, at this point, I'd like to take a quick pause and see if there's any questions or comments. Again, if you do have a question or comment, just click on the raise your hand icon, and I'll see that appear on my control panel, and I'll open your mic for you. Okay, no raised hands, so either there are no questions or comments or you're all asleep. We'll find out pretty soon. Good. Okay, let's dive right into this case study. This is number 2 in this series, and I've titled it More Money Than Sense. This is the Thurman Munson crash. You might recall that. It took place in 1980 at Akron-Canton Airport over in Ohio. He was flying a Cessna Citation 1 SP. Now, Munson began flight training in a Cessna 150 in 1978, so 2 years before the crash. He completed his private pilot check ride in June of 1978, so 4 months total. So that, to me, is a good indicator that he was approaching flight training right. But I don't know, the accident report didn't describe what kind of flight training he had, but he did it in a short period of time, and as we all know, that's the best way to go through any aircraft qualification program. 4 days later, though, he obtained a multi-engine rating in a Beechcraft Duke. So I'm kind of wondering, what kind of mentors he had around him. I certainly wouldn't recommend that he step up to a Duke 4 days after he got his private license. If he was going to, I wouldn't recommend he step up to any light twin. Light twins are very dangerous to fly if they're not flown properly and if proficiency isn't maintained. But the Duke has a pretty bad reputation in terms of single engine handling and so forth. So whoever was advising him, I think, did a disservice by either encouraging him or agreeing with him that it was okay for him to move right up to flying a Duke after he got his private. He had less than 100 hours total time when he got his multi-engine rating in the Duke. So that's pretty low time. Not so much in terms of could he learn the skills that he needed to learn and the procedures and so forth to fly this Duke, but it's a highly complex airplane compared to that Cessna 150, and you can see he moved into it very early with very little experience. So that's kind of a recipe that kind of primes him for problems. A year later, Munson purchased the Citation. So he's been flying for about a year, and he bought a jet. Again, I think that indicates that he wasn't getting much guidance from anybody that was around him. Not that buying that jet a year in like this was a terrible idea, as long as he had a fully qualified and sharp instructor to fly with him for 200 or 300, 400 hours, in my opinion. Because jumping right into flying jets, even a slow jet, as the Citation, the Citation 1SP, even a slow jet with a straight wing like the Citation, it's still real early for him to be transitioning to this kind of airplane and going out and flying it on his own. He received his type rating in 11 days with 10 instructional flights. So that's about normal for a pilot to obtain a type rating in this kind of airplane if he's already experienced. So Munson obviously could learn quickly, and I'm sure he had good eye-hand coordination skills and that sort of thing. But again, very low experience to turn somebody loose in an airplane like this. He logged 23 hours with 32 landings during training. A month later, Munson flew the Citation to Akron-Canton to show some friends the airplane. So he couldn't be very experienced in the jet. Had 100 hours when he checked out. Or maybe a couple hundred hours. I'm sorry, we didn't see how many hours he had when he checked out in the jet. But it was only a year after he had the 100 hours when he got his multi. So very low experience. His approach to this flight showed evidence of poor discipline and lack of knowledge. He did not brief the 2 passengers who were pilots. So if you're practicing Airmanship 2.0, you're practicing a high level of flight discipline, and you would never leave the ground with passengers, whether they're pilots or not, without briefing them. And if they're pilots, then you would have a very thorough briefing on who's doing what. And in fact, under Airmanship 2.0, if you're practicing it the way we recommend, you wouldn't be flying with 2 pilots in the front seats unless both of those pilots had undergone multi-crew training, because it's almost more dangerous to have 2 pilots sitting in the front seats who have not been trained together or trained with the same procedures, 2 pilot procedures, than it is to fly solo in a jet like this. One passenger sat in the right front seat, so he did have a pilot up there in the front seat with him. The passengers were not aware of Munson's intention to fly until he requested clearance for a local flight. So not only did he not brief him, he didn't even tell him he was going to fly. Also, this indicates that he was impulsive. He decided at the last minute to go flying, or he had this as in the back of his mind, and I guess he was just going to drop it on these 2 guys. So again, not very good flight discipline, not very good situational awareness. The initial takeoff was normal. The Citation entered a left downwind for runway 23. After leveling off in the pattern, Munson firewalled the throttles. Airspeed on downwind was 200 knots. Now, that's okay, except that's really fast, especially for an inexperienced pilot. It's well above gear speed, which was only 174 knots. So he was not following at least normal procedures for flying this airplane. When I kind of hesitated when I said normal procedures, in that I hope they taught him normal procedures on a VFR traffic pattern in a jet like this. And 200 knots on downwind is way too fast. And the fact that he firewalled the throttles shows what? That he was undisciplined, that he was maybe showing off a bit. Who knows what? Looks a little radical to me, or a little erratic that he was doing things like that. He made a normal touch and go out of that pattern, however. After takeoff, Munson retarded the right throttle. So again, this wasn't briefed. It's relatively dangerous, even in a light jet like that, although it does perform well when it's light. However, his low experience level, I wonder how many times he practiced this single engine operations during that year that he owned that jet. So not very smart thing to do. And that resulted in altitude deviations of plus or minus 500 feet in the pattern, which I would think all of us would agree is excessive. So he wasn't flying very well. He wasn't trying to be precise in his flying in that jet. And when you fly a jet, Especially, you must be precise. But I'd submit that even in the kind of airplanes that we normally fly, precision is the target. You always want to be as precise as you can be. After another touch and go, Munson offered to let the right seat passenger fly. So now we've got him acting as a flight instructor. And again, not briefed. There's nothing in the report to tell us the qualifications of the pilot that was sitting in the right seat. The passenger was not qualified to fly a jet, however. Munson talked him into, this was by the way, the 2 passengers survived, so that's where most of this information comes from. Munson talked him into making a 0 flap touch and go. So this tells me the pilot in the right seat was probably relatively inexperienced, was probably showing excessive deference to authority because it was Munson's airplane. Munson was a hero, big-name athlete, so the pilot in the right seat let himself be talked into making not just a landing in a jet, maybe his first, probably his first, but a 0 flap touch and go, which is a whole other matter. Should be, and that definitely needs to be briefed. The reference speed VREF bug was set at 93 knots, which was the normal approach speed. Munson worked the throttles while the passenger flew, another huge red flag. Munson obviously didn't know what he was doing as an instructor. That's not what you want to do, and it makes it very difficult for the pilot flying the airplane to fly it because he can't anticipate those power changes that Munson was undoubtedly making. Munson kept the speed well above VREF, so now he's 0 flaps, which should be a relatively high speed, and then he's well above that speed, so flying way too fast. Touchdown was approximately halfway down the runway. No surprise there. That's a nice long runway there, 23. I used to be a corporate pilot based at Akron, Canton, so I know the airport well. That's a nice long runway. The aircraft ballooned 5 to 10 feet into the air after touchdown. As the kids say, duh. 0 flaps, that kind of excess speed. It doesn't take much to get the airplane back up into the air, but he got it back up into the air. Then Munson took control, another very dangerous maneuver, applied full thrust, and made a touch and go. At no time did Munson use a checklist, another huge red flag on flight discipline, showing that he was not practicing any kind of flight discipline on this flight, which all Airmanship 2.0 airmen strive for perfect flight discipline. During the 4th takeoff, Akron Canton Tower told Munson to enter a right pattern for runway 19. Again, 19 is a nice long runway, shouldn't have been any problem there. However, he overshot pattern altitude, so it was starting to indicate he's behind the airplane. He was high and hot, way too fast. He closed the throttle, so he was trying to recover from that bad situation he'd put himself in. The passenger said that he was behind the airplane. He turned base leg still clean. Again, that's not normal procedure for a VFR traffic pattern in this jet. And he didn't lower the gear until the right seat passenger, who was a pilot, prompted him as they approached the glide slope. So again, way too late on the gear, and looked like he was going to forget it. So you had 2 pilots trying to work together as a crew without being trained as a crew, without being briefed that way. The aircraft slipped below the Massey glide path. It drifted left of center line, and both passengers thought the aircraft was too low. They felt the airplane sinking. So either they were, again, exhibiting excessive deference to authority by not saying anything, or they didn't know what to say, because not being qualified in jet, they might not have really known how to recover from the situation, but obviously needed to get that power up and needed to arrest that sink rate right away. The passenger stated that Munson seemed to have his hands full, so at least they observed that, and I would say that from the evidence here, he obviously was way behind the airplane and had his hands full. They could even see in his face that something was wrong. They were at 0 flaps. Again, he wants to do a 0 flap landing, which is not the normal landing procedure in this airplane. But they were flying at flaps down airspeed, so he was flying way below reference for 0 flaps. He was approximately 20 knots below the no-flap speed. I don't know this airplane that well, but I would say he was approaching stall at this point. The sink continued. The aircraft touched down 100 yards short of the runway. It came to rest against a stump after plowing through small trees. The aircraft caught fire. Munson was killed. The passengers survived. This came out of the report. Munson's lack of understanding of his aircraft resulted in a fatal accident. Contributing factors were poor discipline, distraction, unfamiliar circumstances, very low time in jets, very low time in the accident aircraft, and he exhibited air show syndrome. One of the two most dangerous words in aviation. Watch this. Munson was not equipped to know what was happening. He really didn't have enough experience and enough training to really know that, see those warning signs. He didn't have airmanship training, I don't believe, based on what I see here, that if he would have had airmanship training, especially airmanship 2.0 training, he would have known that a lot of those cues, the being behind the airplane, being erratic altitude on downwind, not following procedures, all of those are caution and warning lights telling you that you're not operating properly and you better get back in a situational awareness mode and get ahead of the airplane again. So obviously he wasn't equipped to even know what was happening here. He was late to recognize the excessive sink rate, which should have been drummed into him in his initial jet training, even in that kind of airplane with a straight wing. And also, those engines are pretty good on spool-up times, but they're not the best. So he should have known all that he'd have to anticipate excessive sink rates and stay away from them, and if he saw one developing, arrest it immediately. His lack of knowledge and feel for his new jet put him in a high-risk condition. Again, if he would have been operating in Airmanship 2.0 with dispatchers and shared decision-making, they would have been they would have run a flight risk assessment tool. His level of experience would have been one of the big factors that would have popped out when they ran that tool. So, and his knowledge of his aircraft obviously was very, very low. He exacerbated his condition by his cavalier attitude. Oh, let's just go fly. No briefings, no planning. Lack of precision. He was erratic. He was all over the sky. His failure to use checklists and ad hoc attempt at flight instruction, because he was not a flight instructor, and that would be bad enough in a Skyhawk, him trying to give instruction to the other guy, but in a jet like this, wow, it's hard to believe that he had the arrogance to believe that he could do this. Munson had created conditions ripe for disaster, and as we went through this, you heard my comments. I'm sure you guys were seeing the same thing, because we were calling out the points that caused this accident. You could see it coming. You could see all those links being laid in that error chain, but it was all Munson. He created it. There were no real extenuating circumstances here like weather or mechanical problems. It was all Munson. It was airmanship. He attempted a veteran's play with only a rookie's experience and know-how. I think that's a very good way to look at it. So I have some questions for you now on how Airmanship 2.0 might have prevented this accident. And I know that you don't know a whole lot about it now, Airmanship 2.0, but I think with that quick briefing I gave you, you can pick up some of these things. So I'm going to launch the first question. And that question is, if Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would he have sought out more comprehensive training, do you think? So I've got voting started already. About a third of you have voted. I can see the number who vote here. Almost everyone. Okay, looks like everybody that's going to vote. Oh, there it is. Everybody's voted. Okay, I'm going to share the. I'm going to close the poll and share the results with you. So here you can see that 90% of you think that, yes, he would have sought out more comprehensive training. 10% of you think that he wouldn't have. And I can't argue with that 10% if you're thinking of, wow, he was really arrogant and not too bright in this regard, so maybe he wouldn't even have gotten better training. And we didn't really focus on that in that quick briefing on Airmanship 2.0. But Airmanship 2.0 is one of the cornerstones is comprehensive training. Not only flight training in terms of operating a particular aircraft, but in airmanship training too. Okay. Second question I have for you is, if Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would the peers in his safety culture discouraged him from flying his jet on his own? In other words, if he'd been in that ADSO, that Airmanship Development Support Organization we talked about, he would have peers in there, and they'd all be thinking safety, they'd all be supporting each other, and so if he told his buddies, hey, I'm going to fly my new jet over there to Akron tomorrow and take some guys for a ride, do you think those peers would have discouraged him from flying the jet on his own in that kind of a situation? Okay, almost everybody has voted. One more vote to come. Okay, I can see. Okay, there we go. I'm going to close that, share the results. So again, we have 90% say yes, his peers would have put pressure on him, and 10% say no. And again, without having a full briefing on that safety culture aspect of Airmanship 2.0, you might think that nobody would speak out. But that's part of the culture. A culture has shared values, norms, procedures, policies, communications channels, communications protocols. And in this type of safety culture we're talking about, everybody in it will be looking out for everybody else's good and trying to positively help them. They would, I'm sure guys would have been saying things like, well, really, Thurman, that's maybe one of us ought to go with you. Maybe you ought to take Bill, the check pilot, on the citations with you. That sort of thing. So, all right. Third question. If Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would the safety management team in his Airmanship Development Support Organization allowed him to fly his jet on his own? Okay, almost everybody has voted. There we have it. Everybody's voted. Share the results. And 70% of you this time say no, and 30% say yes. And again, I'm assuming that most of you in that 30% just don't know enough about how an ADSO would work with a safety management team. But under Airmanship 2.0, if you want to do something with an airplane, you have to meet the qualifications to do whatever it is with an airplane. And those are laid out in black and white. And so an ADSO would not have allowed a guy with Munson's qualifications to go flying. That information that he was not qualified to do that would have been in his pilot data file that the flight ops support team would have been looking at as part of the flight risk assessment tool process before the dispatch. So the safety team, which that dispatcher is part of the safety team, would have said, no, you're not qualified to go do this on your own, even if they didn't know that he was going to do all this crazy stuff. Just going over there on his own, taking people for rides. At that point, he definitely still should have had a mentor pilot flying with him. Okay. And another question for you. If Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would he have employed better flight discipline in his pre-flight planning? So he's a guy here that, let's say he had decided he was going to learn all about Airmanship 2.0 and practice it all the time. Would he be striving for perfect flight discipline, do you think? Would he have exhibited it in this flight? Okay, everybody's voted. And 100% say yes, he would have. All right, another one. If Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would shared decision-making have kept him from making a compulsive decision to fly? Remember, they were supposedly out in the airplane. He was showing it to his buddies, and he said, let's just go flying. Do you think that airmanship, that shared decision-making, every flight being dispatched by a dispatcher, do you think that would have kept him from making that compulsive decision? One more vote to count. Seems like election night already. Okay, I guess the last person here fell asleep. So I'll close it, share the results with you, and 100% say yes. Got a couple more for you. If Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would he have acted as an instructor pilot without being qualified to do so? Okay, everybody's voted. Share the results. 10% say yes and 90% say no. And again, one of the tenets of Airmanship 2.0 is you only do with an airplane what you're qualified to do with it. So and obviously he was not qualified to be an instructor pilot. Let's have a couple more for you. If Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would his mentor pilot provide him with a solid assessment of his actual airmanship capabilities? Because he obviously was overconfident. He thought he could do a lot more with that airplane than he could. Okay, everybody's voted. Share the results. 100% of you say yes. Mentor pilot would have told him he's not as good as he thinks he is. We all need to have somebody tell us that every now and then. That's why we all need mentor pilots. All right, we have one more question. If Munson had been practicing Airmanship 2.0, would he have run a checklist at every change of flight phase? Okay, everybody's voted. Share. Yes. Everybody says yes. And as I mentioned, that's part of Airmanship 2.0 is learning that discipline to use that checklist, but there's many, many reasons why you need to use the checklist on every change of phase of flight. In other words, after takeoff check, climb check, cruise check, descent check, all of those, whatever is appropriate for your airplane and your operation. And I can tell you, Bill Brad would tell you too, he never flew an airplane at United Airlines where he didn't use a checklist at every change of flight phase. That's professional airmen do it, and that's what we're talking about in Airmanship 2.0 is being professional and taking that professional approach at all times. Okay, well, thank you for participating in that discussion. And I just want to point out one other thing here in terms of looking at how Airmanship 2.0 would have prevented this accident. Here we have the Kern, what we call the Kern airmanship model. It was developed by Dr./Colonel Tony Kern, who wrote the book Redefining Airmanship. He also wrote the book Flight Discipline that I just finished reading. Excellent. They're both excellent books, and he's actually written 5 books on airmanship, so I'm looking forward to reading the other 3. He developed this model to help us think about airmanship and what we call Airmanship 2.0. And you can see the model has, oops, I'm sorry, tried to click it, operator error there, has 3 bedrock principles: flight discipline, skill, and proficiency. and 5 pillars of knowledge: knowledge of self, knowledge of aircraft, knowledge of team, knowledge of environment, knowledge of risk, and 2 capstone outcomes: situational awareness and judgment. So Airmanship 2.0 uses this model to evaluate our current level of airmanship, evaluate where we need to improve our airmanship, provides a roadmap for us, if you will, for that personal airmanship development plan that I mentioned earlier. So if we can look at, let's just look at some of the elements. Obviously, we've talked about discipline. He was lacking discipline. Skill, he did not have the skill he thought he had in flying that jet. Proficiency, he didn't have enough experience to be truly proficient in flying that airplane. So he was lacking in all 3 of the bedrock principles of the Kern airmanship model. Knowledge of self, he didn't have very good knowledge of himself. He thought he was a lot better than he really was with that airplane. He didn't have knowledge of his aircraft. He obviously didn't know the procedures. He's flying at flap landing flap reference speed when he was actually flying with 0 flaps. His team, he had a team on board with him, a couple other pilots, but he didn't brief them. They didn't come up with a plan, didn't use his team. He didn't have a flight ops support team. The environment, he didn't know the airport as well as he should have. I think that's indicated by the fact that when they switched runways on him, he had a heck of a time, changing from 2.3 to 1.9. The risks, there's no indication he ran a flight risk assessment tool before the flight, and he obviously was taking all kinds of risks, and he probably was not aware of all of them. So his situational awareness was lacking. As you recall, the passengers mentioned that he was obviously behind the airplane, and he obviously looked like he was kind of lost there, so he probably was not situationally aware. And of course his judgment was flawed, and he used poor judgment many times throughout this chain of events. So that's another way to look at Airmanship 2.0 with the Kern airmanship model. All right, well, I'd like to give you one last chance here. If you have any questions or comments, comments are welcome. Just click the raise your hand icon if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. And I have to scroll through the roster here to see if anybody has their hand up. There we go. I believe it's Sandro is the first name. You have a question or comment? Sandro, I have your mic open. Question or comment? Okay. We don't read you. I'm sorry about that, Sandro. I'm going to close your mic. Anybody else have a question or comment before we move on? Okay. So, if you found this analysis of this case study to be interesting this evening, and this talk about Airmanship 2.0 and how you can continuously become a better pilot, a safer pilot, have more fun flying, then I'd suggest the following as your next steps. Register for airmanship updates. Just go to airmanshipexcellence.org. You'll see a little sign-up box there that you can register for airmanship updates. They're free. Keep you in the loop of what we're doing at the Center for Airmanship Excellence and airmanship happenings. You can look for any of the briefings you miss in this series or the other 2 Wings Program Webinar series, Redefining Airmanship and the Kern Airmanship Model in Detail series. All of them are at airmanshipexcellence.org. Go into the Airmanship Resources and the Airmanship Archives section, and they're all listed there, and they're videos. You can view them. There is a plethora of Airmanship 2.0 briefings at airmanshipexcellence.org, as I mentioned earlier. Plenty of information there about Airmanship 2.0 for you. I'd also suggest you subscribe to my blog, Captain Dave's Hangar, where I talk exclusively about airmanship issues. I usually post 2, 3, 4 times a week, so I'd like to invite you to join me over there and continue the dialogue on airmanship. And I'd like to ask you to spread the word about Airmanship 2.0. Even if you don't know much about it yet, even if you're not convinced it's the way for you to go, I'd like to ask you to start talking to your fellow pilots, the other folks you know, and especially to people who might be thinking about learning to fly. Tell them about Airmanship 2.0 and suggest that they go find out a little bit about it by viewing those briefings at the Center for Airmanship Excellence website, and so that you can talk it over with them. You know, maybe we're all wet. Maybe you've got some other ideas. Maybe you can add to what we put together for Airmanship 2.0 and thereby help all of us to not only fly safer, have more fun, but also, we believe, to save personal flying here in the U.S. because the indicators for the health of personal flying are all down and to the right. We're losing pilots. Number of aircraft are down, new aircraft, on and on and on. To us, it looks like if something isn't done, personal flying in the U.S. will first become way too expensive and difficult for most of us, and then disappear and probably be even smaller than it is over in Europe, and more expensive for sure. So we believe that the practice of Airmanship 2.0 by enough of us will reverse those trends. So I encourage you to spread the word about Airmanship 2.0. Well, thank you very much. Please contact me with any questions or comments you might have. There's a good phone number contact for me. Feel free to call me. I don't monitor that line all the time. You can leave a message if I don't pick up, but I'll get back to you. I'd love to talk about airmanship and Airmanship 2.0. You can tell I'm passionate about it, but also we want your input. We want all the thinking we can get on what we're doing here at the Center for Airmanship Excellence. If you'd like to send me an email, that's great. There's my email address, just dcook, K-O-C-H, at airmanshipexcellence.org. Or you can just hit the contact button at the website, the Airmanship Excellence website, and that'll queue up an email you can send to me. Well, in closing, I'd like to again thank you for your time, your attention, your comments, sharing your experience with us this evening, and I'd like to say fly safety.